Hello, it's Friday of the third week in Easter, and our reading today is the entire book of 2nd John. It's only 13 verses. Now, John, in these 13 verses, manages to pack in quite a bit. And there are themes that we've seen in his first epistle, and we don't know to whom that was specifically written. But this letter was written to the elect lady, which is a way of referring to a sister church to the church where John is in residence, which at the end of the letter he calls her sister. Now, he's concerned, like I said, with some of those same themes that we've seen before, the first of which is a reminder to love one another. The second theme that John addresses are these deceivers who've gone out into the world, who John calls Antichrist, anti-Messiah, anti-King, against the Messiahship of Jesus and his incarnation, very specifically his incarnation. Those denying that God the Son has been sent by the Father and is the Christ, the Messiah. And it's interesting that he sets these two things apart. First of all, that he tells them how much they need to love one another. And then he talks about these deceivers because he then discusses the limits of Christian fellowship. Now, you might think when he says to love one another, everybody's just supposed to get along. There should be no differences and no distinguishing between one another, and that would be love. But John carefully says, no, there are limits to fellowship, and those deceivers who are denying Jesus, no, you can't have fellowship with them. You have to separate yourselves from those who deny that Jesus is the Christ. And we find ourselves in similar situations with those who've gone out with false doctrines, with those who deny the Trinity, for example, whether it's in the form of Mormonism or Jehovah's Witness or other religions that are Christian-like that we see around us. But we can't have fellowship in those situations because they deny the Christ. And that actually goes even beyond that, this idea of limiting fellowship, because Paul in 1 Corinthians talks about those living in open immorality, and he says you have to dissociate yourself from them. And we want to say, well, isn't that judgmental? Well, in a sense, it's judging righteous judgment, as Jesus says, that we have to, with those who are flagrantly outside of either the doctrine of Christ or flagrantly and openly living in sin but trying to call themselves part of the church, we do have to draw certain lines and not participate in that sin. And that's what John is saying that you're doing here if you fellowship with those who deny Christ in the Trinity, the incarnate Christ as King. You're participating in their deception. You're participating in what they're perpetuating. And so you have to cut yourself off from that. So John, who is the apostle of love, who talks about how much we have to lay down our lives for our brethren, makes and draws very clear distinctions within how we fellowship and with whom we fellowship. So I think 2nd John is quite an important word for us. And I hope that this encourages you and furthers your understanding of the love that we share with one another, the fellowship we share with one another, and how it has to be limited. I encourage you with this word today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.